Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. Today, we are joined, something a little bit different for all the future lawyers and future paralegals, or anyone who was really listening here. The importance there of business development and leadership and entrepreneurship can't be underscored. It's one thing to be great at practicing law; it's another to be great at the business side, especially if you want to open your own practice. And today, we're joined by Vania here, who is an executive coach, a management consultant, and an educator among many different hats there. So thank you so much, Vania, for joining us here today. Perhaps maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about your background and what are the different things that you do, and we can get started from there.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me, JP. Great to see you again. And it's happy to be supporting this effort. My name is Vania Sakelaris, and I come to my current role as entrepreneur from I guess a real unique and an unintended path. And so as a coach, I'll say that, we're all on a journey, and where we are today is not a predictor of where we'll be tomorrow, but there's threads if we pay attention to them. So my career really was in healthcare administration, and I knew at a young age that service industry was something that was calling to me. I had a passion for seniors at the age of 3, not knowing what I was going to do with it, and it led me to a career in long-term care administration and gerontology when I found out that there was a pathway that started with seniors. And so my passion for seniors led me to what I call the first decade of my career, which was the 10 years wearing the shoe. And wearing the shoe, I was a leader of nursing homes. I'd led large teams, I took care of seniors in the administrative capacity, and working in a not-for-profit. You become the jack of all trades, master of none. So that was my first education really in the field. I paused my master's training and learned in the field, baptism by fire. And as I was doing what I would call common sense solutions in the field, just using my talents, skills, and judgment, I learned so soon that some of the things I was doing to firefight in my day-to-day challenge was considered new business development and innovation by the Ministry of Health, who seconded me. And I joined the ministry for a year, then it became 2 years. And I went from the person wearing the shoe to a shoemaker. And I knew how the shoe fit because of the lived experience I had as an operator. And my 150 seniors became 150,000 seniors that I was planning for in collaboration with the Toronto office. And there were 85 nursing homes at the time, and they were having bed challenges. And the innovative way that I was dealing with managing beds in my home is what caught the ministry's attention. In my world, it was common sense solutions. So as when the regional health authorities in Ontario came on the market, and that became the new planner and funder of healthcare, I was approached by the founding CEO to join their team. And so I never went back. So my system stage, I spent 10 years at the system level. And so my planning population became 2.5 million people. And so the formula was the same. It was scale and scope. The issues in healthcare were the same. And I was just planning for more populations with different needs, but the similar challenges that I had experienced frontline dealing with seniors. And so it was a very highly regulated space. And I found that when my clients became the 18 largest hospitals in the country, I realized that I had never signed up for business, but I found myself in progressive leadership positions. And the one thing that I would inspire, students and young leaders to think about is always be looking in and out and be clear on what the gaps are, what you don't know, how you need to find out what you need to know. And so in that insight and gap analysis, I realized I needed some business acumen, and I opted to go back to school and did my MBA while I was working. And it was at that point that I realized that the transferable skills that I had as the person wearing the shoe and as a shoemaker for 10 years, that my toolkit was really something that was transferable to many industries and many leaders. My passion for seniors and my passion for helping never left me. And as I got into progressive leadership roles, I realized I was too far away from people. I was able to do the job, do it well. I became very successful leading strategies and implementing, but I paid attention to what mattered most, was with my North Star. And it's something that I encourage my clients to do. So fast forward, I took a leap of faith, and I started my own business to come back to what it was that mattered to me, which was helping leaders and helping emerging leaders. And so my business 5 years ago was founded with a group of associates. And what we do is support organizations and leaders with either developing organizational strategies or individual strategies in the context of coaching. So I help people get on their way, deal with challenge and change, and provide them through training, which is where we met, doing capacity building. So it's all about challenge and change. Where there's challenge, you can insert Vania and Vas. So that's my narrative on what I do and why I do it.
Perfect. So thanks so much for sharing all that. And perhaps we could back up to something that you said there about identifying gaps, right? And I think a lot of students, certainly, I mean, who come back and go for a second career, or even building on their initial career, maybe for their example of my students who want to get a legal training, maybe they are working in human resources, and having that legal knowledge will help support them, or it might be a complete transition. Now, in terms of, I mean, even in yourself, they're going back and getting your MBA while you were still working. What kind of helped you to identify, look, these are the things that I need, and kind of looking at the value of that in the long term versus especially while you're working, it's often a major sacrifice, going back and taking on school, the cost of that, and what you're giving up. What kind of helped you identify? What can students look at in terms of identifying some of those gaps and taking advantage of it?
Great question. And it ties right into what I love to do in my coaching aspect of my career. And so what I tell leaders that I work with, and emerging leaders in coaching, is apply the transferable skills from the world of work to yourself. You're the biggest project you'll do in your life. You're the most important project you'll do in your life. And just like when we're executing work in the context of employment, we're always doing risk analysis. We're always doing gap analysis. What don't I know that I need to know? What resources do I need to be successful, be it human resources, financial resources? If we fast forward and go back to the context of ourselves, what don't I know that I need to know? And do I do that through training? Do I do that through working with other people who do know? Like, how do I compensate for those gaps? But being aware of what you don't know is number one, and then doing something about it is number two. But if oftentimes we don't, we just do, and we deal with stresses and things that take away from motivation. And you have to come back to what is it that brought me here, and what's going to get me there. And if we're stuck now, what's better going to look like, and how do I get there? So it's always looking in, looking out, and doing something about it, but being mindful of what it is that you don't know. Again, you need to know.
And then, so you talked about coaching there and having your clients there. Maybe you can give us a little insight in terms of what services that you offer, and how does that help your clients there kind of get to the next level?
Great question. And I'd say that coaching is a profession I didn't understand and utilize when I was in corporate, and I wish I knew what I now knew. And it's funny, when I heard of coaching when I was in the field, I thought, well, I don't need help. I don't need a coach. I thought it was for people who are having issues. A coach in a business analogy is similar to what a coach is in a sports analogy. The coach never does the work. They're on the sidelines. The player's on the field. But the coach is helping the player to call the shots, to understand the risks, to understand the debrief later. When I do work with clients in the workplace, I work. They either hire me directly, or I work with their HR, who bring in coaches to help their people. When there's if there's a struggle, and I often don't do a lot of remedial coaching, but there are cases where remedial coaching, where there's a need, there's a blind spot, there's a challenge or a competency where a leader is struggling, is an example where coaches come in. Or when people are being groomed for the next level and are being considered, for growth, or get assigned to a larger portfolio, and they need a thinking partner. They need somebody to help them think about with them about how to deal with larger scope, larger challenges, and to get over perceived difficulties, leveraging strengths. And so coaches do a lot of, we're trained to not do the work. We're trained to focus on leaders and help leaders be successful, and to figure out where clients are stuck and help clients get unstuck. And so we'll never tell clients what to do, but we're trained to ask the questions to help surface insights and to help people find their way. And so where they're stuck, we help them get unstuck, is probably the best and simplest way to define it.
Now, I mean, one of the things that we have some courses at the beginning in terms of critical thinking and group dynamics and student success strategy. And one of the things that comes up in one of those courses is successful habits of successful leaders. And there's plenty of books and things out there. But what are some of the things that in terms of you say unstuck and give them that push? What are some of the habits and sort of characteristics and things like that you would encourage your clients there to kind of go and help get to that next level, and anything that you can share with students in terms of things that you've shared with your clients?
Great question. What I use the analogy of the oxygen mask a lot, and I say that there's a reason that when we travel or used to travel on airplanes, the stewardess would say, "Put the oxygen mask on self first before you can be of service to others." And so, why as a coach, though I'm a leadership coach and business coach, wellness is part of that. And so, all aspects of a leader's life is important to me. If they're doing great in the job, but they're stressed and not taking care of themselves outside of the job, the sustainability is high, the risks are high. I mean, low, the risks are high. And so a lot of what I would suggest that people consider is, what am I doing to keep my oxygen mask on, and how am I, what am I doing for me as I'm doing for the employer, as I'm doing for the family? And the same discipline that we put into work and managing work schedules, it's developing a schedule for self, and whatever priorities are defined by your students and your collaborators. How do you build that, identify it, and then develop a plan to do something about it, and revisit and have somebody be an accountability partner to help you hold your feet to the fire on doing what's important, to be parallel to doing what's important in the context of work. So I think there always needs to be a leader or emerging leader work plan, and there needs to be a work plan. But the things that matter to each of us, find the things that resonate with you, find the things that are part of your oxygen mask. For some people, it's making sure that there's time for a walk, or there's time with friends and family. For others, it's time for book. Whatever it is, there's no wrong way, but make time for it, because that's the fuel. And we all need fuel to help drive the motivators and the energy, and to activate the unique talents that each of us brings to bear for our clients, and how we add value. We're no good in a stress state. We're not creative in a stress state. We're not motivated in giving our best in a stress state. And so that's the number one thing I would say in terms of a driver of success. Always be looking ahead. I'm going to do in support of what end, and not end clearly defined, but what direction are you moving towards? Life is like a decision tree with a number of criteria of yes or no along the way. Do I do or not do? Do I stop or do I go? You can only inform decisions based on what it is that that you want. What's your direction, and what's your path? And so be relentless about making choices in support of your path is a way to self-define success. And success is only as per our own definitions. We can't be gauging success based on somebody else's yardstick. And so as you have a direction, and set a direction and start. You may not be, course correct as often as required. Figure out what you don't know and need to know, and be seeking mentors. Learn from people around you who are already doing what you're considering doing. There's never going to be somebody who you watch in action, who has an admirable skill, who you approach and say, "I really loved how you delivered that speech," or I really admired how you dealt with that difficult situation. Might you have any tips for somebody like me? Would you have time for coffee to describe? Seek for time. People want to help provide guidance and advice, and so you don't ask, you don't get. I often advise my clients to, pay attention when you're in a meeting. Every single day, life is giving you signals. There's something to learn in every day. And so if you're in a meeting and you're watching, or if you're in a function and you're observing human behavior, but you're mindful and you're observing behavior, what behaviors in the room are you resonating with? What do you be aspiring to be more like? What are examples of some good behavior? What are some examples of behavior that you aspire never to be? Here's what I'll never do. And so we each have something that resonates with us. We each have something where there's dissonance, but pay attention, because those are the criteria that should help guide what you do, what you don't do, what you need to grow towards, what you need to leave behind. And so if we're not mindful, we just do, and then we burn out. And then we're stuck doing things we don't know how we ended up there. But being mindful of our choices, being mindful of what makes us come alive, being mindful of our triggers and mitigating risks, it's a different way of showing up, and again, for this journey called life.
And so it's great there. You certainly mentioned a lot of great points there about mindfulness and taking care of yourself there, your mental health. Law, like business and many other professions, often easier said than done, right? Especially when you're starting, you want to put in all those hours so you can impress the senior partners. And how do you find that time when you're trying to balance everything and grow your career? Is there any strategies that you share with your clients about making sure you schedule that time for yourself? And I get to use your oxygen mask analogy, right? I mean, before you can put the oxygen mask on your kids, right, on the plane, you got to put your own one on, right? Just like before you can help your clients, you got to put your own one on. So what can you do to make sure that you are looking out for yourself when it's a lot of stress there on getting ahead?
I hear you. Again, I was the mother of two children. My girls were 6 and 8 when I decided to go back to business school, and so I was working already 60 to 80 hours a week in an executive job in government, and with a $250 million portfolio of healthcare spending. And I knew that I had to go back to school because I was negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts with CEOs, and it was getting bigger than me. And so knowing what you don't know and doing something about it. So I had to find 25 hours extra a week for reading and for doing my case studies and for doing my deliverables while raising two kids and my husband, and no help at home. But I had to prioritize things. So you say yes to some things, no to others. And so it's always a matter of, I matter most. The priority is me. The priority is passing school and staying well and getting through what I knew would be, hurdles. And so you plan according to peaks and valleys. But again, it's learning to say yes and saying no and prioritizing and putting yourself first. And it sounds like, yeah, easy to say. It's imperative. And so I encourage us to think about, what's more important than me right now is something to ask yourself when an option comes up. What's more important than me or my wellness right now? And there's never not time for you. It's how we make time for us. And it need not be a lavish long break, but it's something that however we define what it is that we need that's going to give us a refuel, it takes many shapes and sizes, different forms, and different people. I have clients who say, I need my drive. My transition time is my downtime. Others say my dog, 15 minutes is my downtime. I got to put my headphones on and listen to music. Even if it's 15, whatever fuels your soul, do it, but don't not do it, because the art of not doing is a risk. And so I'd say scheduling and making time and not treating it as a luxury, but it's necessity is the way to do it. At the time that I was in business school and a mother and an executive, I knew that one of the things that was part of my wellness was booking regular appointments with massage, as an example. And my staff would say, how do you have time to do that? I said, I make time. It's 1 hour a month and I schedule it for the year. It's in my calendar, done. It's a non-negotiable. So it's an hour for me, but it was fuel for wellness. I sat a lot, or I was carrying a lot. And so it's a mind over matter. And if you say you can't, you won't. If you say you will, you will. You can, you will. It's mindset and giving yourself permission to say yes to the things that matter and saying no to things that probably aren't as highly weighted. Not everything has an equal weighting in our life, or should it?
Yeah, that's certainly great insight there, because at the end of the day, it is just you, right? I mean, you make that call. You're the boss of yourself there, and if you don't take care of yourself there, then you're always going to find a reason not to, and then eventually it's just going to build up, and it can't be handled. Now, one of the things for a lot of the legal students there is eventually they may start their own practice, and again, going into law school, and again, even in any legal studies, I mean, a lot of the focus is obviously on learning the law and the theory and how to draft a contract and the case law that goes if there was a breach. But sometimes, and certainly it's probably changed over the years since I went to school. But what about the sort of the business acumen that is missing, right? In terms, I mean, there's a lot of great joint MBA, JD type of programs where you get that. But for those who aren't in there, what are some of the things there in terms of some of your clients maybe who are just starting a business or looking to start a business? Some of those quick. I know it's obviously not easy with the general do's and don'ts there, but what have you seen in terms of mistakes or missteps that may have been made, and ways that you can kind of hit the ground running, so to speak?
Well, good question. And so if I back up, I ran not-for-profits for 10 years. And then when I became a funder, I funded a lot of businesses. And so so when I switched over to entrepreneurship, I realized I'd helped a lot of people either start a program, start a service. And I do a lot of work with a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs as a business coach, including at U of T and a few other Canadian universities. And so one of the things that I often go through with entrepreneurs is, or people who aspire to be, is, what do you want? What's the purpose for your firm? What's your mission for your firm? What's the differentiator of your firm? It's asking the question about, who am I going to serve? What's my why? And so what's my expertise? Who's my target client? What do I want? What's the value that I want to bring to market? What is it that I want to bring to bear? So it's defining, starting to draw a box about, I'm not going to be the lawyer for everybody. And it's, who's my target market? What's my expertise? What's my, what is my value offering for? What's the pain point that I'm going to, through my unique expertise and talents that I'm going to bring to bear for a target market? And it's important to draw boxes. Otherwise, it's, it gets overwhelming very quickly. And so you start off shop knowing you're going to open shop for, certain individuals. Then how do you define what's going to make my offer value? What's the value add of my offer? What am I going to bring to bear as a differentiator, or in addition to competitors in the space? And thinking about that and defining that narrative is important. That's the elevator pitch you hear, people reference. And so you meet somebody and you say, I have a business that does X for Y. You need to be able to say, I'm in the business of X for Y. What's your business? Who's it for? And because it's part of getting used to doing a narrative, which is part of promoting that you're open. So defining that sounds very simplistic, but it's important that I see a lot of businesses fail because they're not clear definitions. There isn't a focus about what their efforts are going to be going towards and what measures of success will be. So having a framework in terms of a plan at very high level, being able to populate what's my offer, who's it for, what success will look like at the end of year one, at the end of year two, at the end of year three, framing your thoughts so that you're going into it with some anticipation of what the aim is, and then measuring it along the way. And so in order to get to X, what do I need? Well, I'm going to need financial resources. I'm going to need infrastructure. I'm going to need support. I might need, what support? What functions do I need to get here? Do I need to readjust my goal because it's unrealistic given my resources and time? Do I need to adjust the goal? Never lose the goal. Do I need to adjust the timelines of the goal based on the resources? But it's setting an intention, developing a work plan, setting up a path, and making sure that you have financial resources, human resources, infrastructure to support the value offering that you've defined that you want to bring to bear. If people just embrace the thought of, what it is that I'm selling and why, and how will I know I've been successful? It starts with the narrative. So practice the narrative, building a narrative, and then identifying, as we said at the top of the hour, what are the gaps and what do I need to be successful and how do I fill those along the way? Do I need to seek financial resources from an investor? Do I need to bring in some skill sets beyond what I have? Do I need to have some infrastructure in place, including IT and other enablers of success in order to get going? But as you get going, keep identifying, what don't I know that I need to know? What don't I have that I need to have? What's my path to fill those gaps so that you're mindful of risks and managing them along the way? Nobody starts off an instant success. It's how we respond to what happens and having a path of where we're going, which would be the most basic way to think about a framework for thought on how to approach, the notion of starting your own venture.
I see a question here for one of the students. It's a little specific. So I don't know in terms of how much you assist law firms in your coaching there, or those in the legal field, but kind of asking about some of the problems that legal entities may face and how to solve them, as well as if there's any insight you might have in terms of business dynamics surrounding law firms or legal entities.
I do have clients who are lawyers, both in my coaching practice as well as my consulting practice. And so, I think that, give me the question again, because I want to be able to directly answer it. I want to be clear on the ask so I can define it.
Yeah. So what are some of the problems that you've helped law firms solve in terms of your career? I guess you can look at it from either the consulting side or the coaching side, and any insight there about the business dynamics about law firms or legal entities or sole practitioners or what have you.
Good question. So I am an expert in service industry, and I consider law one of the professional services. One of the professional services that benefit through integration of business. What I mean by that is you all have gifts or aspiring to have gifts in terms of your expertise. But the problem is oftentimes challenges that some of the firms face are, things like startup, things like growth, things like competitive issues, competitive scans. As you're starting, I have a client now a lawyer who has had unprecedented growth in terms of demand for her services related to the pandemic. And one of the challenges that she's having, just like a lot of businesses through the pandemic experience, is what's the best growth strategy? And what she's going through is, what's the expertise that I have? How fast can I grow my team? Do I bring in new resources, impact the culture of my team? Do I, specialize in a certain type of law as opposed to, a broader scope of services that, version one of her firm had in place? So again, being clear on what you're providing, not providing, and if there's, a demand out exceeding your supply, how to manage that gap, and what would be your scale and growth strategy? Who do you, what might be a way to go about, as you're starting to go forward, there's increase in demand. Are things like strategic partnership solutions that I should be thinking about? Are partnerships with companion firms that specialize in something complementary to me, so that I have a suite of services available to clients who might approach me and make me more attractive than, another similar law firm. So thinking ahead is something that I would, signal, that, the guests consider. Partnerships is something that I think that, we have to be thinking about, and always looking at the competition, and always being able to think about what do they have that I might potentially lose a client to, as a result of what's a new need that's emerging, or what's a growing need, and how do I stay ahead of that? What do I need to do to manage, ebbs and flows of needs in the world around us? I spoke today in my class about, the impacts of globalization on value chains. Nothing stays the same in business. And so what's happening in the world around us that people in industry might require my legal skills for, based on what's happening in terms of new trends? Are there new tech trends that people are going to be seeking my advice, legal advice for? Are there new cyber things that are going to, depending on what your areas of expertise is, the world keeps shifting. So how do you position yourself for where you anticipate the need will be? And how do you put your offer out in front of people to let them know that, proactively, I think in my world would be ideal. More people proactively know about legal frameworks, not reacting and calling you only when there's a problem. I feel that just like healthcare, I see law and healthcare very similar in terms of people come when there's a pain point. They don't come when they're healthy. Oftentimes in law, and I know because I was one of the people calling my paralegals and calling my labor lawyers when I was running homes, is when there was an issue. But how do you build your pipeline by helping to inform your clients proactively, and build a pipeline by taking a different and non-traditional approach, so that you're building capacity and building, your network and your customer base that way, so that when there is a need in a reactive context, then there's already a relationship, and it's something to, be a bit of a differentiator in terms of, suite of services that you could be thinking about offering to clients.
Now, you mentioned this particular example where the pandemic resulted in unprecedented growth, and how to kind of handle that growth. I mean, sort of the pandemic has changed pretty much every area of business, any industry, significantly, and now kind of we're at a, maybe let's say, stage 3 of not necessarily the pandemic, but sort of what's the future, right? What's this? Is it a hybrid kind of thing? Are we still going to keep a lot of the tech? What are some things, though, for those looking to kind of establish a business now in this time frame? I mean, have the the brick and mortar offices gone out the window? Is the Zoom fatigue? That's it. I mean, we're slowly going to kind of go back. I mean, what are some of those trends that you mentioned, whether related directly to the pandemic, or anything else that any business, whether a legal business or someone wanting to start something up in one of their side hustles, let's say, to kind of be mindful of, in light of where we are at this moment in time here in late 2021?
My anticipation, a good question. And so, definitely what the pandemic has done is created disruption and created more, it's prompted new ways of work. And so what's going to happen is, my prediction is, some old ways of work over Zoom, some new ways of work, and some hybrid will emerge. And so given that there'll be three streams of industries and businesses operating as we look at an endemic versus pandemic approach to thinking about this, from a legal perspective, I would encourage your members to be thinking about, and in anticipation of three different ways of work, how might my area of expertise be relevant or add value to problems that I anticipate that people who might have been on a in-person model might be facing now that they're a fully remote model. And so what might be the legal aspects of support that I can provide to businesses that are pivoting and having thought about a business continuity plan, all virtual, and what that could look like. Some of you might be in the employment side, some of you might be in real estate side, some of you might. So where is your expertise, and how might a shift in the world of work for some of clients in a particular industry, and there might be many clients in that industry, might target an industry approach. There might be just one specialization across industries, but think about what's the relevance in the legal context in a business model shift that you can add value. Business is all about how do you create relevance in the eyes of your client. And so the businesses who have been very successful, that when I was a funder, was the ones who were always 2 or 3 steps ahead and anticipating the need and following the money, and came to me with proposals for growth. And I funded them, and they were risk takers, and I was also a risk taker as a funder. But as you see things shifting, where are they going to bump up against? Because something they don't know. And these are the legal frameworks. These are the restrictions. These are the risks that they don't know that they don't know. So how do you empower them with things they need to know? How might the new realities in terms of a workforce and HR law, or how might the realities of cyber hit them? How might the realities of accommodations hit them? So depending on which lane you're in, anticipate needs for people who have changed. Anticipate the needs for those who are going to have hybrid. How do you manage a workforce? How are those employers going to manage in the office and offline? New frameworks, legal frameworks. There'll be, how do we ensure pay equity? How do we ensure fairness? How do we ensure, there's a lot of laws that Ontario, in the context of Ontario, that will need to be complied with, but in a different way. And people need legal frameworks, and businesses don't know what they don't know. They're going to land themselves in hot water. They're going to come calling later when there's threats. And so I would say, I would invite your members, your students, to think about what's changing from a legal context in terms of the world of work. Which industries are most likely? What are we seeing in terms of which industries aren't likely to go back? You can hear it even on the news. Another company said today, they're not forcing employees to come back. Every day on the news, there's another company declaring they're forever going to be at home. And what are the implications for those companies from what in a legal standpoint? And how do you get those messages out to those employers? How do you align yourself and make yourself relevant to what they need to know, and have a pipeline ready, so that when the problems emerge, you're already there, you're known to them, you're building a relationship, so that the relevance is known and the value that you can provide to them. It might start with this knowledge and mobilization, and then full-blown suite of services as the world post-pandemic continues to unfold with a lot of unprecedented unknowns. That would be one framework that I would invite folks to think about.
And as you said there, if you're proactive and see those trends before everyone else does, then you're in a lot better position when it comes time for those seeking those legal representatives in those particular areas, because you've stood out there. Now, I did want to talk a bit. I know obviously you spend, one of the other things you do is, as you mentioned, they're talking about teaching earlier today, is in education. And certainly with the pandemic, obviously it's been a challenge, as you can relate to with that. So what sort of brought you into education itself? And what have you found, in whether it was in person or now remote, or I don't know if it's hybrid in some schools, how has that all been going for you?
So I would say that when I was in the field, I did education in the field. It probably because as a not-for-profit, I couldn't send as many leaders as I wanted to education programs, leadership programs, and to things that their corporate partners, were had some supports in accessing and capacity building. And so my in-services in the field is where my interest in sharing the wealth and building capacity of my team started. And as I continue to learn through baptism by fire, I realized that my path to leadership provided me with a lot of really great learnings. And I always had to share the wealth mentality. And so I went back and started to teach while I was in the nursing home context. I would teach at night nurses who wanted to become administrators and become managers and join the administration force. And then after I started my business, I realized that I purposely said in my strat plan, leaders and emerging leaders. So the people who needed me to help them in the field, then I could do that through strategy. But I also had a desire to help this generation behind and benefit from my road traveled and things I learned along the way and things that I wish somebody had told 20-year-old me. And so things that weren't said in theory or weren't taught in business schools. And so the first thing I did when I started my business was went back to my school where I trained, the Ivy School of Business. And I became a case writer. And I started to create content and education that I felt was relevant and examples from the field and bring those into the classroom. So real industry dilemmas, success stories and failures that I feel could really benefit students. And so I did that and then started to come into the circuit as a guest speaker. And because my target was, what don't students know that they need to know? I'm practicing what I preach here. Be relevant to the market. How do I bring relevance to one of my target markets, which was students, with my goal of capacity building? And so my business is about helping people be successful in business or as they prepare for business. And so I started with what I knew best. And that's what we should always do. We should start with our strengths. All of us have something to bring to bear. All of us today have something that brought us from here to here. And so I started doing teaching, guest speaks, teaching in strategic management and strategic planning, and helping organizations and boards understand that world of mystery. And I then went on to start to teach entrepreneurship, new business development, and so I realized that what I had wasn't limited to one school. I ended up building a client base of a number of schools. So I fly out to UBC and I do training there and I do coaching. In their case, it's because they have a physician leadership program that I support. At U of T, I support the Department of Management. At the Ivy School of Business, I support their executive education program. At the Schulich School of Business, I'm supporting the municipal leadership program because I understand the world of government. And so who has a need for something that I have to share? So it's doing the matchmaking all the time in business and thinking about the relevance and engaging the stakeholder, making them aware of your offer, and then pitching the offer and delivering it. And so the academic space has become a place to share, to knowledge mobilize. And while the medium of Zoom is a different medium, the constraint is not as engaging as a classroom for me. There's situations like this where you don't get to have the human impact of seeing faces and being able to do the connection, as we did once upon a time. But the delivery still happens. We're able to record and share knowledge, which is my passion, and being able to impact the end user with information that I feel they need to know to support them on their journey. So the more people, I equate it to like a ripple. The more people that I can share that wealth with, it's kind of a value creation game, value derived on both ends for different purposes, different motivators. So that's really what drew me there. The delivery of it is challenging. The fringe benefit, however, is my reach is greater. I interned last year. I had three students from India that I worked with to develop a case study. I then did an internship with another couple of groups from a university in India, 2 in the US. And so borders became invisible. And so my desire to reach students, it became borderless. And so while there are constraints in terms of, face-to-face, the trade-off is reach. And so we always need to be looking at risks and benefits and how much risk are we willing to take for how much benefit.
Yeah, I think that's something you mentioned about, or you were lecturing about, I think earlier today, about the globalization of everything now. We are borderless, right? That what's to stop you from doing a workshop, even any of the students and anywhere in the world, right? So how, again, to kind of recognize that we are in these, and one of the things I do teach an international business law course for a number of students who are from India and looking to kind of look in terms of leveraging some of their businesses and consulting with understanding all the different laws in all the different countries, right? You could be the manufacturer could be in one place, the sellers in one, the buyers in another, the the shipping, and all the different laws, and make sure you put the choice of law clauses there in the contracts. But in terms of from a business perspective or a management perspective, there, what are some of those risks that companies have to be aware of when they are jumping into a foreign market that maybe you've talked to your students about from that perspective?
Great question. And so it always starts with the basics. And so all of us, all of us are bringing to bear an offer. But when you're lifting your offer in terms of a different geography, it's knowing what you don't know. And so not assuming that it's a one size fits all. And so, today I gave my students their December assignment. They're doing a consulting gig, and some of them have projects they're supporting in Africa. And I said, what you need to make sure that when you're doing you know how to do a pest and SWOT analysis, you know how to do a bit of a business case in terms of recommendation for a client in North America, but to be relevant to your client in Kenya, I need you to take an extra step and make sure that you do the analysis of those conditions, the political framework, the economic framework, because the recommendations will only be as good as the paper they're written on, if, in terms of the end value to the clients there. So be relevant is something you're going to hear me say over and over again, is understanding your client, know a day in their world. My client is where and what's the context, so that when I bring to bear my offer, I need to consider the context. That will change in every geography. What you bring to bear will be the same, but how it gets delivered to the client needs to take into consideration the receiver. And so it's something that needs to be an automatic in order to stay relevant, and be relevant in order to manage risk. Otherwise, the risk will manage you. And so once you've done a market entry plan for one geography, there'll be a lot of learnings for what it took to get into a region. And so I had the same experience when I first went into the US with my company. I didn't know what I didn't know, but I had to learn very quickly. What do I need to know? Well, there's tax implications. How is the money going to flow? Are there any legal, restrictions in terms of how I can operate? And so what I didn't know, you develop your list of what you don't know, and you relentlessly go after what you need to know. And so who's the expert in accounting? I sought an expert in accounting. Who was the expert in, border crime? So you need to, there's always an expert, but you don't need to be the expert alone. It's accessing the expert, which is work smarter, not harder. It's kind of the success line in business. And so I developed a formula. Now I have my visa. I can do what I need to do. I now know the 5 tenets of market entry. And so, the same thing applied to my work in India. I have collaborators in Hong Kong. And so, there's a couple of basics now that become the formula for market entry. And it'll be a pain point like any new business or like any new venture. There's things that it's kind of a startup pain, but it's what do you take away from that, and what's the key? What's the repeatable key? And if there's a failure, what's the what not to do? There's wisdom in what not, in a failure as well. We're richer for failures, and we're richer for the challenges that life puts in our way. But how do you replicate the learnings to your benefit as you continue to grow is kind of, again, a framework for thought.
And one of the things there, I think, you mentioned obviously finding the experts and the leaders there. I mean, for students who are wanting to get some knowledge, I mean, part of that is obviously networking and finding the lawyers and then the paralegals and those in the field who can help guide them. And maybe it's something you might have shared with your own students there in terms of how do you get in touch with those people, especially with networking with the frailties maybe of Zoom and not as easy. I mean, it's a little easier today than it was a year and a half ago in the pandemic of setting up like a little coffee chat. But what have you shared with your students about kind of getting getting access to those people that you need to get access to?
Great question. Last week, my lecture was on networking, and so one of the pieces of advice I gave is it's important that when you're reaching out to somebody that you need help from, that you've done that, be mindful of their time, and don't ask for the thing that you can't get through all other sources. Limit the time and work effort, or in terms of what it is on the other end in terms of disruptive, and show respect for the time. I suggested that you kind of we all need to do the homework. We all need to do the relevance so that people realize that you've done your version 1 before knocking on their door for version 2. Nobody's going to give you a get out of jail free pass. People want to help people who are helping themselves, and people will know very quickly whether you've come knocking with no agenda, and you're not managing their time effectively. So stakeholder management is key. And in networking, it's not it's how we have the discussion that matters as well. I can have, I recall even in my busiest days in corporate, the people who got my time were is how they asked for my time. And I had many students who sought mentorship, or how do I get in government, or how do I get to this, and which program should I take? It's all in how they ask the discussion. So, setting the context, framing your ask, being mindful of what it is you're asking for, and being very specific on the ask is the best way to kind of position yourself for success in the stakeholder engagement. Identifying the number of people you need to engage in order to get collectively the answers you need. Not one person's going to give you the eight answers. You might need to approach people selectively, or cast a broad net, and maybe sometimes it'll be 10 doors you knock and one answers, and that's fine. It keeps you moving. And so and being mindful of people are busy and they won't answer right away, and not to be excessive in terms of the reach outs. Some people may not be willing to. It might be how you ask. It might be they're just not able. Keep going. Don't beat up. It's managing your own expectations in terms of response rates. And so I know that in my business, 30% of my time is business development, and business development is pounding the pavement to talk to people, to better understand needs, better understand where the water is going to kind of pitch. But not everything converts, and not everything should convert, and not all asks that I put out to the market come back with responses. But I have to be relentless in seeking the information I need to keep my business successful. Managing your mindset, knowing that not all doors will open, is fine. They're not expected to open. Ask yourself what you might do differently next time. What was successful in getting some doors open? Repeat, repeat, repeat. If there's certain things that you find are getting you better responses when you're doing cold calls, those are things to continue to be paths for success. I find that to be, some insights and analytics for us to leverage in terms of helping ourselves to keep going. And also, what didn't work, that's learning in itself as well, and tracking the successful efforts with the successful efforts.
Yeah, you're not going to keep repeating the unsuccessful efforts there and hoping for a different outcome, right? So,
but people do.
Well, you just hope maybe this is the time, right? But I mean, sometimes it is like that
Yeah.
law of averages. You knock on a few, as many doors. I mean, eventually you're going to find the people there to help you. So Vania, thank you so much for taking the time here and joining us, sharing all that valuable insight for my students. So wondering if you have any final words of wisdom there. I know you've shared quite a lot of wisdom with us here over the last hour. For again, whether it's in terms of leadership and entrepreneurship and business development, and certainly as they go from making that transition, I'm sure you've had many, many, many students who have gone from being in your classroom, virtual or not, out into the business field there. What would you sort of say to my students here who are looking to make that leap as well down the road?
Life's a journey, and it's going to have ups and downs, and know to expect it. It's not what happens, it's what you do in response to what happens. Honor you always. Pay attention to self. There's lots of clues there. Don't compromise self. Be unapologetic about saying no to things that aren't working for you, and be relentless about going after the things that you want. Things might be harder or take longer, but pursue it anyways. It's worth it. If it's something that it's a goal of yours and it's your passion, chase your passions, and don't despair. There's always a path. Some are just harder to find. Life will give you the keys to keep unlocking doors, and enjoy the journey, and enjoy the people you meet along the journey. They may serve a good purpose later, and you don't realize it at the time. Nurture the relationships you build. And just as I said, honor you and take care of those goals, and be easy on yourself when things don't go as planned. Keep going, be relentless, be resilient.
Perfect. Great words to end with there. So again, thanks so much, Vania, for joining us. And as well, thank you for the opportunity there. It was great to have a different class there a couple of weeks ago to look at again. And then incidentally enough, I had this international business law. I'm like, oh, look, everything kind of worked out. It's sort of like the reverse Murphy's law there. So thanks again for joining us. That's and thanks everyone for tuning in, and hopefully see you next time. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Take care. I wish everybody well.